Dr. Tom, what? So, hey everyone, this is Andy Hall. This is 420, and this is Dr. Tom Foolery, Hairless Ape. What happened, Dr. Tom Foolery? We were celebrating your awesome internet, and then you disappeared.
When you went live, apparently my browser crashed.
Oh no! Oh no!
As long as it's nothing to do with the new internet.
Doubt it. But, mm.
Right. Well, congratulations once again on getting your super fast. And supposedly there's a speed going up. And though I am a little skeptical about anything being called Q these days, just because of QAnon. Like you have some kind of you get your conspiracies like really they're just a little bit faster than trusted news sources. Good morning, D. Hope you're doing well this morning. Hope you're doing well. And
Yeah, when I got it installed yesterday, the installer was telling me that, yeah, they had just turned on the fiber last week. And I was like, I just called them last week and they said, oh, this is new. And apparently I was the second person installed in this overall network.
wow, congratulations. What's up, Dave?
Oh, the rain, the sky, the clouds, and all the good things. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm here. Wow. Yeah. Congratulations on all that.
Well, it is the West Coast, and we do live in a rainforest. So.
Right. Yeah. When we were up in Vermont a couple of weeks ago, the girlfriend was impressed with the raininess, the forests.
The liquidity.
The liquidity. That's right. The liquidity.
Yeah. Well, we're one of those places that, generally speaking, for most of the year, we have green grass and green trees and things flying and running around everywhere. And, it's a lovely place to live. But, if you live in a rainforest, you're going to experience rain.
Here go the name. Unless it's false branding, unless it's fake branding. You're going to get some rain.
I mean, I spent that one summer in the desert, but that was totally wrong branding.
Well, you go there for the sand, but you found you got the rocky road, and it must have been a tough road to go on.
I think I misunderstood the brochure because they said you can't starve because of all the sandwiches there.
Oh, right, Dave. I see what you did. That's horrible, Dave.
Oh, I got a million of them.
Well, I've seen a sample. The sample size does seem to point that way.
And how are you, Sammy?
I'm good, Dave.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm well. I am well. I'm just waiting for, the spin the big wheel of dispatch and find out if I get to work today. So yeah.
Right. So what are the odds, Dave, on any given day that you get tapped for work?
It changes drastically, actually. It depends on the type of work that's available, what's available on the Vancouver dock, because they're allowed to do what's called wolfing, where if there isn't enough work for all the members at the Vancouver dock, they can plug into our board. And obviously, if they're a member, they take priority over the casuals. So it pushes everybody down. So when we have like 2 car ships working, we get a lot of members from the other board. If their dock isn't busy enough, we get a lot of them pushing us down.
Bastards.
It also depends on how much work there is at our dock. Now, normally, like on a busy day, Deltaport will run 3 ships out there, like 3 full-size 360-meter container ships, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work. Sometimes they're running 9 or 10 cranes out there. Normally 7 or 8.
And do you ever get any sort of roster, or is every single day you wait for the call sort of thing?
When you get to the point where you make membership, you still are on call, but eventually there may open up a position that is like a regular shift thing. Or if you go into if you become a foreman, most of the foremen have scheduled shifts, but because we're usually short foremen and they're restricted with how many hours they can work in a period and all that, we run out of them. So guys end up having to work double shifts or a +4, where two guys bookend a shift. One guy works his 8 hours and then 4, and the other guy comes in 4 hours early and then works his 8-hour shift. So, but there's the majority of the people who do this find out at this time in the morning if they're working that day.
Yeah.
And we dispatch in the morning, and then in the afternoon we dispatch for afternoon shift and graveyard. So there's 3 shifts a day. It just doesn't stop. So
You're right.
so
But
normally,
do you sort of know by a certain time in the morning whether you're going to have to work, or do you have to? You could be called any time of the day.
That's interesting as well. If it's a busy day and there's enough work to go down quite a few boards, dispatch is usually later. So we've had dispatches in the last month come out at 3 minutes after 7 and 7:55 for the 8 a.m. shift. So literally everyone who's watching that board is late for work.
Yeah, dude.
And then it goes by a rotation on each board, so that the boards are all alphabetized A, B, C, D, E, and so if it goes down to like D50, the person who's D51 is the first person who's going to get dispatched on a late call. So if somebody has a flat tire or plugged in last night, woke up and they're sick this morning and they call in, they can't make it, or they get in a car accident on their way to work or something like that. Or if a foreman says, I'm going to need 2 extra guys today, send me a couple more laborers, they get dispatched on what's called a late call. So those guys will just get a phone call. You guys have heard it when I've got a phone call and said, hey, I got to go to work. That was a late call. And then there's also noon replacements. So if somebody is doing a job that they're not comfortable with, or if they somebody cuts their hand, has to go to first aid, something like that, they usually replace them at noon. So they'll give you a phone call on that list as well. So you only get paid for 4 hours, but at least you get a shift and you start at noon. So, and then they have a thing called a sleep robber that is essentially a late call list for the overnight. So if the board comes down and it stops like 3 people in front of me, I'll make sure that I plug in for sleep robber, and they can call me anytime from the time I plug in. I've literally got a call right when I plugged in telling me, you have a shift tonight, we've got work for you. And then I've got calls at 1:30 in the morning waking me up out of bed saying, get down to the dock as soon as you can, we need another spare. So
You're like a volunteer fireman, Dave. That's what you want.
It sounds like there wouldn't be many family people. I was going to say family men.
Surprisingly, there are. And what's ridiculous is there are often people who've met on the dock and married. So both of them are on call, or one of them's a member and one of them's on call, or something like that. So, yeah. Because the benefit of this job is if I had a dentist appointment this morning, I wouldn't plug in. I wouldn't be available for work. Nope. And the dispatch slips just came out. I because I write code, I wrote a page that automatically refreshes the page the slips come out on, so that I see them right away when they come out. Doesn't look terribly interesting so far.
So what I'm hearing, Dave, is that you could hack into the system and give yourself work if you really wanted to.
You can get fired for that.
I'm sure you could. I'm sure
But
you
that
could.
wasn't the question, Dave.
That wasn't. I see exactly. Dave dodges the question.
They call it gimmicking the system.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
So actually, the board went down to one board above me, and 3 people who I was on the last board with before they every 6 months they shuffle the boards up, so people with the average hours or better move up, people with less stay, people with none move down. So 3 of the people I used to work with on the last board actually got out today, but where the work pin, the last person to get dispatched is where the pin stops. So they go around and around and around the list. So the pin right now is about 25 people away from me. So the chances of me getting work today are non-zero, but not great. but it also means that I might get out this afternoon. So
I feel like I'm talking to a Las Vegas odds maker, right? About the board. I think there's a board somewhere that people moving up and down the board about the chances of things happening. That's what I think this kind of conversation is all about.
yeah, and we should have some sort of gambling thing where we can bet on, in the morning we can bet on which board it goes down to, and hit the pass line.
It almost sounds like work, Dave, before you've even gone to work.
It's actually, once you do it 10 times or 12 times, you get a pretty good feel for it.
Yeah.
But it is, it is an on-the-fly thing. You have to be ready to jump. And like I said today, because I'm not right behind where the dispatch stopped, if I do get a call today, it's very likely to be later in the day or closer to a nooner, because there's just a lot of people.
See what you're doing there, Sammy. Dave's getting called for a nooner. Are you sure you're doing dock work, Dave? And what kind of dock work are you actually doing there?
Getting booty calls.
I am a dockman. I am not docking. But it is one of the, like I said, there's benefits to the job. Every day is a new experience.
You're not making it sound any better for you, Dave. There are benefits to going in for nooners.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
No, it's got, like I said, if you need a day off, if you want to take a week off, you just take it. If you, when you go to work, there's all kinds of really cool things to be engaged with and learn. There's some great people down there. There really are some, especially as you move up the boards, the people who want to be there, who want to work, who put in a good day's effort, who work intelligently and want to be efficient. You end up working with more and more of them. The one thing that I've mentioned before is you working with stuff like that, you lose your fear of dynamic weight, like of heavy things moving around you, because you understand where the safe zones are and how to work safely and who's working safe around you. You lose your fear of heights. Like that's something like, go climb up 150 feet over the water line hanging over the back of this ship and lash these containers to the boat, right? Like,
whenever you say words like that, Dave, it makes me think that those are evolutionarily useful fears.
Definitely they are. That's what keeps us alive.
Right.
Yeah. But we have railings. So yeah, it has been a very interesting experience. And it does require a little bit of patience and a little bit of, you got to get up early, you got to plug in, you got to be ready, you've got to respond at the drop of a hat.
Sure.
But it is a good place to work. It is a good job. Yeah. And it's very difficult to get into.
No, I imagine it is.
See, I imagine I could get, and I'm only saying the words, I can't imagine this at all, but I imagine I could get over the fear of heights, which I couldn't. And, other things like that. But the thing I don't think I could ever get rid of is the mistrust I have for man-made objects. To fail, to not be maintained properly. Whenever the human element is involved, I get nervous. It started when I was young, going over bridges. I always thought the bridge was going to collapse under me. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, that's common.
But it sort of stayed with me. Not bridges, like bridges are fine now, but just heights. It's not so much the height, but is the thing that I'm on going to maintain stability? Is it going to hold me? Is it going to break? Is something going to fail? If I'm staying in a hotel and I'm up really high, I'll go out onto the balcony, but I won't touch the railing, because I think as soon as I lean on that railing, I can't put my trust
What
Because
do
I
I
will
get?
be that one person that the railing fails on.
I have to admit, there are places that I go that are high that have a railing, and before I lean on the railing, I will kick the railing very, very hard. Because if somebody hasn't welded it properly or bolted it properly or something, I
You know,
want
I do that with my trash barrels in case there are rats inside. True
Oh.
story. My kid was taking out the trash one day at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where you would think rats wouldn't be around. Opened up the lid, there's a rat, wondering what the hell she's doing there. So now, so now I do the kick. I do like just to alert the rat that I'm coming, basically.
So you want the rat to
whenever I lock up my bike, I always do a good yank on the bike rack to make sure that it's bolted down properly, and person can't just take the bike rack with my bike.
And
I've
can
seen
I
guys
do a
that.
bit of a premonition here, Dave? There's going to be a death one day. A railing's going to give way at your work. Someone's going to die not long after you've been on shift. And the report will come out and they're going to say, I don't know, we looked at the railing and it looks like somebody's been kicking the damn thing.
Well, let me tell you, these railings are made of 2-inch and 3-inch tube steel, and they're welded to the decks. They're part of the ships. Me kicking them isn't going to do anything to them. They're actually made to protect people in the event that a container like fell off or some gear fell down or something like that.
So they're
Pretty much everything that we have, that we use, all of the tools, all of the buckles, all of the straps, cables, and chains are all rated for 5 to 10 times the amount of weight we're lifting with them.
I always go back to the question, which Dave cannot answer because it's proprietary, is the fact how many people die on the dock every year. And I understand you can't answer that, Dave, or how many injuries there are, you know? I understand that.
You cut out there, Andy.
Right. You got to know what metrics. You got to know what metrics to be concerned about, right? You got to be, you know.
Is that something you can Google easily?
I don't know.
We don't want to get Dave fired. Listen, this is one of the things here.
Maybe there are some statistics Dave can tell us, like how many people work there, how many people quit, and how many people are hired, and then we can extrapolate how many people have died.
I don't know how many people total work there, and I've never heard of anyone quitting. I know people just, if they find other work that's more profitable, if they open their own company and they go do something else, they essentially just drop down the lists and get removed from the lists of people who are available for work. So there isn't really a...
So someone who took lots of shifts and was quite high up and then dies might stay on that list for quite some time, isn't it? No, they'll take them straight off.
They take them off because other people move up, right? Yeah, and that you know what, that we have had a couple of deaths. One of the guys who I didn't actually work with him. He was so high up, we just never worked at the same position, and he was rated for other jobs. But he died of cancer recently, and they took him off the list and moved other people up, and that, yeah. But like any job, if you work with over 1,000 people every year, someone's going to die, right? It's statistically speaking, you know, that happens.
And can you answer whether, like, do you have to sign NDAs or something about?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at the channel before the show. Sammy and I, we were this is like maybe a couple of hours ago. Sammy showed me this video of a right winger, you know, an attractive young woman who's one of the angry cheerleader types for Fox News. You know, she's not in Fox News, but you know how Fox News has the angry cheerleader types that they like to put on. So this person has her own, I guess, YouTube channel, and she probably aspires to be a Fox News host at some point. And her video is the very skewed history of the Democratic National Party, the DNC, basically, where she talks about those old canards, about Democrats were the pro-slavery party, And did you know that they were against the 14th? You know that they were against human rights back in the 1860s? And it made my fucking a blood vessel burst in my head, because it is just something that Republicans love. It's just one of their talking points. And if you're not here in the States, or if you don't know, it's like, of course, because of President Johnson and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act during the 1960s, white Southerners stopped being Democrats and became Republicans, just because they loved racism so much.
Yeah.
The Dixiecrat Rebellion.
The Dixiecrat Rebellion, that's right.
Well, I watched it, Andy, and my eye started twitching.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? I need to contact Andy and see why my eye is doing this.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen it yet, there's a video that dropped this morning from Seth Andrews called
Dee was mentioning that. In the chat, yeah.
Oh yeah, Christians versus the Pandemic, Guess Who Wins? Yeah. It's
Did he bite my title? Did he bite my style? Because I think that fucking bites
I was
my
thinking
style.
you guys did some sort of collaboration to like.
Oh, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem with being a little bit like, when it's a little bit ahead of the curve, is that at some point everyone gets up to that point of the curve. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm going to shut the fuck up and just keep talking.
She's saying it's a collab without the co.
It's convergent evolution. That's what it is. It's
Yes.
when, and this is just how ideas are, right? Concepts are. And for those of convergent evolution is when two different species basically share the same traits, but aren't related to each other. Like bats look like little mice with wings, but they're not little mice with wings. Not even closely related to rodents. At least that's my understanding of it. So ideas like that too. So, I come up with a shitty joke that's just, you pull these ideas out of the zeitgeist, out of whatever's in the culture, and you cobble them together. And guess what? Someone somewhere else takes those same basic pieces and cobbles up the same shitty joke,
It's one of those things they talk about in war efforts, right? Like when you see the United States with the enormous budget, and they try to be like leading the way on every technology that's out there. And obviously nations are spying on each other, and they're trying to figure out things, and they're paying for information from others and all that. But there is a paralleling of development of drones, of missiles, of technology, of communication security. Like all of these things are being developed in different nations by different people, and they're almost keeping pace with each other because of the nature of our knowledge and the availability of hardware and information and solutions and all that. But every now and then somebody jumps out ahead and the others catch up quickly.
Or there's this, and this is part of the calculus on how countries declare war on each other, or on the timing of when countries declare war on each other. Because if a country sees an enemy and they have, their side has like the small edge, which could be a huge edge in combat,
right?
They will push for a war during that critical period of time. You see that time and time and again in history. There was not to get too obscure, but there was an Austro-Prussian war where the Prussians actually had bolt-action rifles that allowed you to lie down on the ground and shoot, while the Austrians had old-fashioned muskets that were muzzle loaders, so they had to stand. Very quick war, everyone. But that's how much technology can really shift the tide of battle.
Weren't they were talking about the Alamo, and they did a huge scan of the area around there. And they found that most of the soldiers were using bolt-action hand-loading rifles, and most of the people who were attacking them were using like those 14-shot.
The Henry repeating rifles, probably.
Repeating rifles.
They are. Well, there was a long time in the history of the U.S. that you would get a better gun if you went out and bought one yourself. Or in World War II, families, you could buy a Tommy gun at a hardware store for like $400-500 or so. Sure, it was a lot of money back then. It still is. But people would send frontline troops a Tommy gun, their son or cousin or nephew, and if that guy died, they would just give the Tommy gun to somebody else in the troop. So yeah, I could easily see that a force that had Henry repeating rifles or some other kind of repeating rifles completely decimate.
And apparently, during that war, there was people who were injured in battle and had like a broken arm or some issue where they couldn't fight front line.
Yeah.
And when they went in and wiped out, they took over a city or whatever, it was their job to go in and steal or pick up all of the enemy's ammunition and weapons and utilize it in their forces.
Yeah. If you're far away from any kind of supplies, then you have to basically live off the land, and that goes for ammunition as well as food. What's up, Theo? I see Theo in the chat.
Hey.
Hope you're doing well.
So, question, because I'm quite interested in futurism. I think most critical thinkers are. Have we passed the point where, because I've heard a lot of talk about that China is moving towards taboo areas like genetic manipulation and looking at basically super soldiers. I've lost the term they use for them, but genetically modified soldiers.
Yeah.
But aren't we really getting past that? Like, unless you're planning to actually physically invade a country and land on their shores, like wars are basically fought at a distance now. I know, Afghanistan, Iran, when we're going into the place, it's a whole different story, but country against country is still done air and missiles, essentially, really, isn't it?
Those soldiers could be used against their own people. I mean, when you're running when you're running an authoritarian government, then
that got dark.
Quickly. I don't know. It's pretty. It's when you talk about super soldiers to it's So who anyone who lived through Tiananmen Square or any of the other around the world, these kind of governments against their own people, then you could easily see that those kind of soldiers could be used against large crowds of normies for all intents and purposes.
You mean? Do you mean a well-armed militia stands no chance against the U.S. Army? Is that what you're talking about? Is this a Second Amendment thing?
It stands no chance, but when you look at one of the constant things we've been talking about here, since Donald Trump was president and during the chaos of the elections, like it's the people who have guns in the military who actually hold the ultimate power in any society. You may not like that, but it's true. It isn't the people who have a lot of money. They count. They have a lot of power, but ultimately it is the military who has the ultimate say about what goes on. They may not exercise that power. Our military has been, and here in the U.S. and in the West, the military has been subservient to the civilian government, but that's not the rule in terms of societies in general, I think.
So, do you think that in the future, and I'm talking, far off, distant future, the wars would be fought rather than by using weapons, by using economic structures and water and food and
they have always been fought using economic structures. One of the
but I mean solely. Yeah. Do you think it'll get to that point?
If you can block
that's kind of what a siege is or was. Kind of controlling, the trade in and out and controlling food in and out.
Yeah.
That's always sort of been done.
Yeah.
And some people said that Donald Trump's tariffs were a warfare that he was trying to wage, which was purely economic for a while.
Unsuccessful.
But you're right, Dave. They're generally just a part of the war. That's not the whole war, you know.
I would say most of the time, it's really a question of, especially in modern warfare, where you have these large nation states, right, that can summon all their resources to engage in long fights. That it's really a question of economies and about who gets worn down first. Like World War I, World War II, both of those are good examples. When you look at the charts about how much each country could produce, there was no question that in a prolonged war, the Axis, or the Central Powers in World War I, could really fight the Allies in a long-term conflict.
Yeah.
And in some sense, the Cold War, if you ignore the proxy wars, there's no direct fighting between, like, the United States and the Soviet Union. But,
Well, I think that was a bit of a misnomer. The Cold War and the war on drugs weren't really wars, and they weren't well fought.
Well, the thing is, if you want to say that something that's purely economic isn't a war, then the
Right.
answer to the question is you will never have a war that is purely economic.
Now, having said that, is it in fact moral to starve an entire country out for the sake of putting that economic pressure on them, to put them into poverty, to cause millions of people to die? Or is it more moral to take out their leaders with a smart bomb?
Well, the another good question is, okay, so there are a couple of different things you're asking here. I want to address the first one is, and the implied question: do blockades work? Do economic sanctions work? And to tell you the truth, it's very dicey. Freakonomics, the podcast, did a great episode on whether or not they work. They did the data analysis, and it turns out most of the time, no, there's no effect. And it's when you do get effect, it's just as likely to be something completely against what you were hoping for.
Yeah.
And so most of the time you're going to get nothing. Sometimes you'll get something in the reverse direction, and only like 1 out of 10 times are you going to get something that you're hoping to get out of an economic blockade.
Yeah. An economic blockade essentially just gives someone else the opportunity to step in and do business, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and theoretically, you're right. Sanctions really hit the poor population, not really the people in charge. So
if they're like Trump and they have a disconnect with the people at the bottom of the scale, economic sanctions against the U.S. with Trump in power would be the equivalent of doing next to nothing at all.
Yeah, I think that countries do foreign policy because of domestic policy, right? Because of domestic politics. That's trite, and I'm not the first person to say it. But if you're a democratic country and you're running for, you're coming up for an election, and people are pissed off at country X for what they're doing, then it's in your own political interest, if you're a politician, to vote for sanctions against that country. It's stupid, but that's how the system's rigged. I mean, that's how the system's set up.
So sanctions generally don't change who's in power of who you're sanctioning.
Yeah.
It'll hurt the poor and stuff like that. It will also change dynamics of what countries influence other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what you want to happen, you can get something to happen through sanctions. It's just good people generally don't want those things to happen. Bad people might. And
So, true story. When coronavirus first came out, our government was basically, other than I think America, or maybe at the same time as America, publicly pushed for a global investigation into Wuhan.
Yeah.
And China responded by massive sanctions and like stopping trade altogether of a lot of things like wine and beef, and massive hit to our farmers. They're the only people that were affected was the farmers. But thankfully, the farmers themselves took it upon themselves to reach out to other countries, and they've more than doubled the trade that they were doing with China. So we've wound up doing better in most of the places that China tried to punish us.
Well, the Chinese have been the victim of their own shitty policies. The heavy-handed Chinese policies during the Trump administration, or reaction to Trump, have just really helped surrounding countries become closer militarily. Forming like this anti-Chinese coalition for all intents and purposes. So yeah, and you can see what China's doing right now with its own economy is that they are. I think I said this yesterday. They're shooting themselves in the dick. And it's a question. I mean, this is a question as old as time. When you have an authoritarian government, how much free market forces are you going to allow in? Are you going to sacrifice your own power for economic stability or economic growth, I guess? Because you can have stability in the short term by strangling free market forces. And I know I usually don't make free market arguments here, but I think that the Chinese are the greatest danger to the Chinese. The Chinese government is the greatest danger, and that's not original either.
Yeah, and when you have a situation where corporations have a great deal of control, and you have farmers who want to sell things to other countries and are being blocked by the government, there are ways that they can form collectives or cooperatives between them, where the largest farmers can actually become a corporate entity of their own, doing business in multiple countries. And when you push them to the point where they have to take that action, you lose control over sanctioning them against anyone anyway.
Yeah. And this is how stupid the Chinese have been. They've been spending like billions of dollars trying to create goodwill in the countries around them and in Africa. And these sanctions that they did and their heavy-handed policies have just undermined all their efforts.
So it seems.
Yeah.
So it seems. Yeah.
Which makes me a little bit happy.
It should make you a little bit happy. Yeah, you gotta take the good news.
You gotta take the small wins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
Oh, earthquake mentioned in the chat. We had an earthquake here in Australia today. Was in Melbourne, and apparently people felt it here in New South Wales.
Oh, really?
I don't even know how big it was. I have to look that up.
I saw people on Facebook talking about earthquakes, and but it didn't seem to be like a major super duper earthquake. So
5.9.
Oh well, that's significant. Yeah.
Decent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's significant.
I lived in the not the epicenter, but right close to the epicenter of a 5.5 earthquake when I was 10 years old, exactly, actually, and I was on the toilet taking a dump, and my friend. It was an outside toilet, sort of in a laundry.
Oh,
my friend was.
It was an outdoor toilet too when the earth opens up.
Yeah. And my friend was outside the toilet waiting for me, and my 10-year-old brain, as I've started going up and down and not realizing what this could possibly be, all I could think in my mind was he was throwing giant rocks at the door.
Oh, okay.
So while this is going on, I'm yelling at him to stop.
Yeah.
And the poor guy's just, it's not me. Neither of us had a clue. My mum inside thought we had ruptured a water main because we had been digging under the house. Then she thought, no, because there's no damage. We've been hit by a car.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's no.
I just want to point out there's I'm going to draw a connection between Cryptomeria and what you just said. Cryptomeria said people complain about migrants, but she doesn't see how they're part of the problem. And you know, Sammy, I want to go back to you and your mom blaming the natural human instinct when shit goes wrong is to blame someone else, right? Like literally, there is no one to fucking blame for some things like
And
that.
sorry, I went the wrong way. She literally thought a plane hit the house, then was like, no, we'd be dead, so it must just be a car.
Okay.
But then when she couldn't see damage, like it took her multiple options before she thought natural.
So the first basic instinct is to blame someone, and not just to blame someone, but to blame someone lower on the hierarchy than you, right? Someone lower on the primate hierarchy. That's our first, because that's scapegoating, right? Things don't go right either in your personal life or in society in general. You got to blame someone. That's the stupid brain thinking. And so migrants, or your buddy throwing big boulders at you because you can't take it.
Or your stupid son digging under the house.
Right.
So
busted a water main.
In Australia, do you call people best friends or do you call them primates?
Dave, you've been working on that one. Dave, I was noticing Dave's been quiet for a while.
But how Australia?
Mate.
Mate.
Mate. The mate bit. Sorry.
You're working on that.
It's like
I was
20 to 1 here.
You guys were talking about earthquakes.
Yeah. Is this you want to share this, Dave?
I live in an active earthquake zone, and there's a thing that's called the Pacific Northwest Seismic Project. And in here, you'll notice, well, this is Canada up top, and they don't actually share information for this purpose. There are maps of Canada, and it's just as bad as this. But you can see these are just recent earthquakes in the area. And you'll notice Mount St. Helens, Mount St. Helens, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Vernon, where there's Mount Vernon. This entire mountain chain is volcanoes, the whole Cascadia chain, right? So, I mean, when they talk about California and big quakes and volcanic activity and all that, you know, we don't have as big of volcanoes, but we have so much activity up here. I think all of the small shakes, like when you feel a big truck go by on the street and the ground shakes, if an earthquake happened at the same time, you wouldn't even notice. They're all little shakes, but we've had a couple of big ones.
Sure. You know, Dave, somehow I think you're trying to make me jealous of your earthquakes up there. That's what I think you're trying to do.
We just have them, you know. Yeah.
Right.
You know, like bears and other stuff.
They come with the free healthcare.
They come, exactly. Well, you know, theoretically points out that NATO countries export guns and invade countries and complain about the refugees and immigrants. It seems to be a nice point to just once again shake my fist at Bush the younger. And we've just fucked up that whole area. Able to fuck up Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and so exporting refugees, destabilizing governments, fascists, right-wingers taking advantage of people's innate fear of the other. Thank you, Bush the younger. You did a crackerjack job.
Andy, I know you like to do this blame storming thing, but don't you think that if Bush or someone was actually responsible for destabilizing an area, resulting in war and a bunch of lives, that he would have been tried in The Hague for crimes against humanity or something? Like, do you not think that, that would have followed?
Oh, of course. If you're gonna do the math out, Dave, right? If you're gonna do the math out, I think you have a bunch of U.S. presidents going up for war crimes, right? I don't think that's a radical statement. But when you're in charge of at least we have the second largest. I think it's still officially the second largest nuclear stockpile I think the Russians still have officially more than we do, but I'm not absolutely sure. The chances of a U.S. president facing trial in The Hague very low, very low.
Is it because they nuke it?
You know, who knows, Dave?
You know something that I think we all know, but it had never truly dawned on me, was look at every, we'll just take the Middle East. Everywhere that America has gone into the Middle East, where they have not openly said we're there for oil or for whatever reason, you can factually say without a doubt that it was bullshit, because if it was for, the sake of the population, or like Saddam Hussein, he was such a horrible person and committing all these horrible crimes, it's all bullshit. Because why is North Korea still a thing?
Nuclear weapons.
If it was ever altruism, if there was ever altruism in any form, North Korea would have been the first ones.
Yeah.
But they don't have anything that anyone needs. So
there's I think, and I've said this is not the first time I've said this, that a lot about Iraq had to do about Iran, that Bush and his buddies, they thought they were running the table, and if everything had gone smooth in Afghanistan and Iraq, how long would have been before Iran would have just been a U.S. Colony for all intents and so, but it just doesn't work like that. It just didn't work.
So why, if there is a NATO and there is a G12 and there is these organizations, why don't they have contingency plans for when the United States goes in for regime change? Why don't they have something set up where a committee of nations is put in place to create a utopia? That's what
I was gonna say about fucking North Korea. Why have they not done that? Use the smart bombs, bomb Kim, bomb all these cronies and all the other powerful. Because yes, there'll be a vacuum, but fill the vacuum with a committee of nations, not with just America.
So a little bit about the Korean War is that MacArthur, who was in charge of the NATO forces, which was just America and a bunch of allies, MacArthur wanted to go all the way up to the border of North Korea and China is the Yalu River. And the Chinese basically told Americans, listen, you don't want to go up there. It isn't right. We're going to do something about it, because the Chinese have been invaded through Korea by Japan, by other powers a number of times. And so they see Korea as they cannot allow it to fall into someone else's hands. So they see, they see North Korea as a necessary buffer state.
So North Korea is their moat?
That is their moat. Yeah, that is their moat. Just as much as Poland is a moat for Germany against Russia, in a lot of ways.
Knows it.
And the thing is that, the U.S. forces in the Korean War went up to close to, and I think right, skirting the Yalu River, and that's what caused the Chinese military to swarm down. And it actually created the largest U.S. military retreat in history, is from the retreat back down from northern Korea.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes of that is, "We are not retreating; we are advancing in another direction."
Well, that's what was so bullshit about the Afghanistan withdrawal, right? It's like, it's a retreat. You can just call it a retreat, right? I know it might hurt your testicles, America, that you're actually retreating, but that's what it is. That's what it is. It's a retreat. You could say it's withdrawal. Okay.
Advancing backwards.
It's very quickly. Yeah. Or as Monty Python would say, run away. Run away.
Yeah, that was a lesson that was well learned at Dunkirk.
Yeah, just swim away. Or
We're gonna retreat. We're out of land.
yeah. Well, that was the plan. Actually, that was actually the German plan. was to make sure there was no place to run except for the ocean or for the channel.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's up, Randolph Richardson? I see you in the chat.
Randolph, he's just over there.
He's just over there, right? Well, Dave, we don't use the metric system, so Randolph would actually be over there. Wow, that was like really fucking dumb. I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah. I love it when Americans come up here and say, how many kilometers is it away?
Yeah. Kilometers, indeed. So this is what I'm thinking about doing, is moving the after party after show from 10 to 9:30. So we would do the pre-recorded video because I think that's just easier for people. And so.
Well, you got to give us a break to decompress and write notes and get coffee and stuff. So 9:35, I think is.
Oh, really, Dave? 9:35? I
think that's peak time right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is 6:35 my time, which is perfect. Lines up with my schedule very well.
Oh, very good.
And it's only gets later and later for me, so the earlier you do it, the better for me too.
Sammy, I've seen you on either Facebook or maybe Twitter, and it's like, wow, he is still awake. That is just
yeah.
You're on a very different schedule from me.
But I'm sure people see me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning too, going, "What the hell is Andy doing?"
Dude, I'll drop messages during the day, which you should be sound asleep, and I'll see that you're active, and you'll respond straight away. And I think, God, I hope I didn't wake him up to answer this ridiculous meme or something that I've sent you.
Sometimes I wake up at 5 and I realize it's already 8 o'clock where Andy is. He's up. He's probably at work by now or something. So I don't usually hesitate, but I expect that if you go to sleep, you mute your phone or at least put it on vibrate or something, right?
Oh yeah, dude.
That's an excellent question. I just want to say on that before anyone else answers that you were talking about the water recently. How the largest source of America's water is from Canada.
Yeah.
And I saw a thing about water usage in the world per country. And America, man, you use a shitload of water for a developed country that I know you do have a fair bit of desert in the south and stuff, but man, you use a lot of water. And Canada is like at the bottom. Maybe because it's cold there, and I don't know, you just don't seem to drink water, or you don't bathe or something.
You don't drink water or bathe, Dave.
Canada's water usage is so insignificant, and America's is so large, yet all your water is from Canada. So I do see that becoming an issue possibly one day.
This is not good branding for Canada, but it really is the Saudi Arabia of water.
How dare you? No, I agree that there is going to be problems with water and water usage, but in Canada, despite the enormous amount of water that we have available, because the government has essentially interfered with the ability of us to build hydroelectric power plants. There was 4 proposed. We ended up building 1. The Site C Dam is still a huge controversy, and I have no idea why. It should have been built 15 years ago. But we don't have the ability to store enough water in the rainy season for us to have enough water in the summer season. So we don't have the infrastructure. So we have low flow toilets are mandatory, energized dishwashers are mandatory, low flow shower heads in apartment buildings are mandatory, And in a lot of places, they charge for water now.
Yeah.
So we've had those regulations put in place because as global warming takes effect, our rainy season is lower, our water levels in the lakes are rising less, and we have less water available to us. So we need to build more infrastructure for that. But if we build a huge ass dam, that water's got to come from somewhere, and it's coming from what we send down to the United States, and they don't want us to do it at all, so they lobby against it hard.
Are you telling me, Dave, that a country with all this available water has chosen to do the right thing and not waste it?
Yeah.
And not, so you didn't need to have these restrictions. We have all of those things like, laws. Every house that is built in Australia has to have water tanks that catch the rain off our roof.
Interesting.
That we use to water lawns and, all of these regulations. But that's because we live in a fucking desert and we had to.
Yeah.
So it is so commendable. Whoa, I shudder to say it, but so commendable, Canada, to have done that. It's amazing.
We have non-watering restrictions, so a lot of people have gone to put those, the space cubes with the metal frames around them. They're a plastic tank. So people will put those up on a 4-foot high thing so that they're eaves troughs where when it does rain, the water pours down and goes through a screen and then through a filter and then into the tank. And when the tank is full, it'll overflow out of it. But that provides you with 500 gallons of water to water your lawn in the summer or water your garden.
So that's a makeshift version, Dave, exactly of what every house in Australia has to have. A tank that all our gutters go to a pipe that feeds into a tank. That usually with a simple filter installed in your house, you can drink as well.
Yeah, there's ways to treat that water, but essentially up here we classify it as gray water, and you wouldn't use it for drinking, but you could use it to wash up in. You could use it for your garden. You can wash your car with it. It's great to have extra water around.
So in Australia, we drink that shit straight, like there's no and for a long time obviously there was no filtration. It just came straight from the tank into the house, and people would often have to get people to come out and get in and clean the tank because the tap would start pouring mosquito larvae, frog larvae,
tadpoles.
But are they tadpoles before they're tadpoles, when they're still like the little frothy?
I will say one thing, just going back about water in the U.S. usage, a lot of cheap real estate over the last 30, 40, 50 years, actually ever since, air conditioning became a thing, has been in the Southwest. And there's no water there.
No, and I don't know if you guys know about the Great Lakes Project, but they're downtown Toronto is actually using water pumped from the Great Lakes because it remains at a fairly constant temperature. And they basically pump the water out into a grid system that cools it off, and it gets pumped back into the buildings and cools the buildings off in the summer. And they have found that with all of the adaptation and usage of the system, that they are literally warming that area, and they are changing the ecosystem of the area around it.
Yikes.
So, I mean, we have to be careful about how environmentally friendly we make our systems. Yeah. Like we have to adapt to the point where we take care of the planet so that we don't have global warming, so that we don't need air conditioning all summer long, so that we're not burning that coal or other electricity that's generated by nuclear, or we're warming the lakes to cool the cities. There's a lot going on out there that needs some serious attention. And it seems like we're still on the downhill side of the roller coaster, making more and more and more of this and making the situation worse and worse and worse for now.
Gonna make it worse and worse and worse until I don't even know when. Until someone can make a buck out of making it not worse.
You're probably right. It's going to get to the point where when somebody comes up with some amazing technology that changes the world in a drastically different way, when we come up with a battery that can be recharged by solar, and there's a multiplicity of charging from solar or geothermal or something like that.
Well, we covered I don't know last week about the CO2 device, right, in Iceland that was sucking CO2 out, capturing CO2 carbon out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that is probably going to be, part of terraforming the Earth into something habitable.
But you realize that as much as that is great new technology, and as much as that is a wonderful idea, it's like trying to clean a Costco with a toothbrush.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. You look at how much how much gets pumped out into the atmosphere and how little. And that was large. That was like 4,000 tons.
The easiest way to get carbon out of carbon or greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere is to stop putting them there, for sure. Like that's absolutely the answer.
And I agree with you 100%. I know that Harvard just divested from fossil fuels. I saw it in the news maybe about a week ago. So
yeah.
So that's possible. But I'm gonna have to cut things, everyone. Same thing tomorrow. Well, actually 9:30. We'll do this at 9:30. Drop the video at 9, and we'll do the open room at 9:30. That's right. Check your non-watch there.
9:30-ish.
Who wears a watch anymore?
No one. All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys. Have a great day.
Okay.